I got a story to tell you to explain what immersion really is. And it's kind of an amazing story because about 10 years ago, I was at Microsoft and my wife was at a finance company, and we were watching our kids playing Civilization, and we asked ourselves, what if we smash those two things together? You know, the spreadsheet and Civilization, and everything on the screen was being driven by numbers. Wouldn't that be interesting? And so the four of us, that means my wife and me and my son and my daughter, decided to start a company called 2B3D. And our company has had an amazing amount of success in building virtual worlds because we are immersed in virtual worlds. We're immersed as a development team. We're immersed with our customers because our customers come inside and literally live with us inside a virtual world when we develop for them. So I kind of want to show you what we discovered and how all that institutional knowledge moved forward and why we developed the kinds of things that we do. So when we started back in 2007, we were working with Elliot Mazie, if you know Elliot Mazie, and Elliot asked us to create a virtual world concept. And so we decided to use Second Life because Second Life was very popular at the time. But we didn't want to just build buildings like everybody else was doing. We wanted to build some type of an activity where people were doing something and they were being timed and they were competing with others and there was a result. So we took the McDonald's and we taught people how to fry a hamburger, right? And we had them do it in the right amount of time. Before, you can't see so much of this. They had to go wash their hands. They had to hold their hands underwater for a certain amount of time, and it was all timed. And so with the whole point is that can we train people to do something in a virtual world that when they go to the McDonald's training centers, they already know what the behaviors and expectations are. The way this is going to work is that we used an infrastructure and built something on top of it, and we've been doing this and augmenting it since the very beginning. We actually looked at what mobile applications needed to be developed in the next year, and then we decided that some type of research needed to be done. So we've always had this model from the very beginning. In this case, we decided that mobile learning had to happen, so we started wondering, can we move Second Life over to the telephone? So we had to show applications that Second Life would work on the telephone just as much as it did because telephones were disrupting the computer. We also decided that we needed to study people on site, in process, and observe their behaviors so that we could imitate their behaviors. Well, that progressed into this thing that you all now know called gamification. Of course, we weren't using that word back in those days. And this was us working with Ernst & Young and doing inventory audits. So you would appear as an avatar in the warehouse and you'd have to check in and you'd have to literally go do an inventory using Ernst & Young's methodology. And what we were focused on at the time was, can we use Ernst & Young's measuring outcomes and develop them so that when people went through the process, they would get the same sort of evaluation as they were walking around in the real place. What we discovered from a research point of view is Ernst & Young loved it, but could we reuse Ernst & Young's materials? Could we put all of their other training manuals and all of the other content that they'd been building for their training courses in World as well? So all around this environment, you'll see access to, at first we were just using pictures on the side, and then when media came, we started accessing their websites directly. But in our retail store, and this was the very beginning of bots, we started creating problems in the retail store. We'd create spills. We'd have something knocked over on a shelf. And we would ask ourselves, could we integrate Cisco's real technology into environments? So we started to look at how to program outside of Second Life into Cisco's technology. What Cisco wanted us to do was not just be able to get them to be able to use the technology, but they wanted to find out if we could develop trust in the environment. So how does a district manager trust the Cisco guy that's coming in? Well, if the Cisco guy is walking around the retail store and he's understanding what the problems are in the day of a life of a retail manager, then he would have the same communication problem. So once again, using that ethnography, but looking for interesting ways to working in the field, we started looking at how people were responding as physical beings. Could you use a virtual environment to change people's health behavior? So we created this thing called Club One, and of course this is only one aspect of it, but we paired it with a 12-week course for losing weight. What was interesting to us is that we used the real study with, I think we used about 6 different classes, and we had the same 6 classes, another group inside of the virtual world doing the exact same exercise, except for they were simulating running, they were simulating exercising, and they were going through the program. It turned out that the people who went through the virtual program lost more weight and lost more body fat by using our virtual systems. And we tried to figure out why that was true. And we found out it had to do with virtual socialization. They were spending more time with each other. They were communicating and hanging out together. They were getting dressed. They all started out as large beings, and then they went down to boobalicious beings, and then they started working with each other and getting to know each other. And it was like, where'd you get those clothes? Have you ever been dancing before? Do you want to go to a museum? The next thing you know, they're developing social behaviors with each other. These women came together, it was mostly women, and flew into, I think it's San Francisco, in order to be able to interact with each other and continue their socialization. That's why they were really having this impact on them, because they changed their social behavior. Is because our team was immersed with these clients the whole entire time. We were in their places physically, but most of the time we built right here within the environment. The next thing we started to look at with the Army, because we were looking at post-traumatic stress disorder, and if you heard Kevin today, we started wondering what people were doing inside of their homes. So when they came back from Iraq, what kind of behaviors did they have? What were their nutritional behaviors? What did their bedrooms look like, and how were they arranged for good sleeping, because they were suffering from insomnia? Where do they sit when they go into a restaurant, because they're afraid that people are going to attack, so they sit way back from the door. So it helped by going through these home environments and these mall environments, it helped to understand how people could communicate better with their husbands and wives, so they can understand why they were experiencing some of these PTSD experience point of view. How do you hook up with Amazon services? Everyone that comes into Second Life builds buildings. So we took on a building project as well, but we wanted to take on a building project that taught people. So we found in Cucamonga a building that was designed specifically to teach sustainability. How is the cooling happening with the materials used for the walls? How is water circulated and refreshed within the properties? How is the plant recycling the water that comes down in that arid part of California? So we started realizing that if we were going to build architecture, maybe we could build architecture that could teach people sustainability, which is something that we've all been interested in learning about. And then we made sure that all the content was interacting with the ecology of the environment, and then we developed the ability to change the environment up by the press of a button, so we could switch between California and Washington State. But the big problem that we started running into in hooking up to all of these devices is what was the rate of capture that we could get from the devices as they were working in real time, and how are we going to integrate that into our environment? The military builds a lot of simulations. A lot of people have been talking about that for quite some time. They're extremely costly. Every time you go look at these bids, they're in the millions of dollars. So we were approached by the Navy and asked, could you build these exact same simulations within these platforms that you could build in very quickly? And we can build at much lower cost than everybody else. So we started to replicate the various simulations, the drone simulations, the warfare simulations, and we'd make all of the technology in the panels work with all the machinery. The whole point, again, is trying to get the soldiers working in these environments for long periods of time so that they could go through decision-making processes faster when they did the training in real time. Up and remember again that we keep asking these questions, and I was talking to Paulette, her team the other day, about How do you get everybody in the team or in the faculty starting to think like this and move in this direction? And it's because you have to get everybody basically signed up to creating these environments, but they need a reward in order to be able to do that. And the students need a reward to be able to go through the environment as well. So we started asking ourselves the question of, can you accredit these worlds? And if you heard this morning, that's exactly what started to happen. One of my former students is here from the University of Washington. They were the first people I convinced to, can we start creating classes in your university, in your information school, and get students to get credit for building these environments? And to date, I've trained about 1,200 students in design and development in virtual worlds. And I've linked into all of them, and it's amazing where these people are and the kinds of programs they're building within the different companies that they're looking at. The thing that started to happen was we wanted to know if we could start conducting conferences in World, and we conducted the Federal Consortium of Virtual Worlds as one of the conferences, and several other conferences where they would happen in real time, and then they would happen in virtual time. And we would find that the people who were participating in the virtual conferences were a lot happier than the people who were in the conferences like this, because they were talking amongst themselves. They were chatting together, they were refreshing web pages together, and they were interacting with each other, and so live streaming became the key idea. As you heard again from Kevin this morning, the other thing that we did is we built a lot of the mechanics into the environment. So if you sat in a chair, the camera would move automatically. You didn't have to learn how the environment works, and then you could move from slide to slide, or you could move from object to object within the environment. The faculty, too, had all the ability to control the environment from their podium as well. So then we started asking, could we do therapies in the environment? And so we started looking at, could we use the various assessment tools in PTSD and train people in the environment. We continue to go on into expanding now in the virtual world. So when you have immersive worlds where a lot of you have built a single incident within a virtual world and it does a particular thing, we started to wonder if we could start expanding the community. So if we had a conference center, could we have a sleep lab beside it? Could we have a nutrition hall beside it? So we could start building what you see in a lot of the gaming environments, environment after environment after environment, so we could start showing the scalability of working in these environments together, and the faculty and the teachers who were working in the previous environment could take their skills and move to the second environment. Of course, this became a cheaper and a cheaper idea when we started saying, can students build the content so we didn't have to build the content for everybody? So we started to turn to the students as my student. It's funny because I don't know his name in real life. His name is 8-Bit. And so 8-Bit would be one of the students who would be building all of the content and just letting it grow, which was fascinating. The research problem that we encountered was, well, we love it, but what about the other students at Duke or at UW or UMass? How are we going to get them involved in the environment as well? And how we know we're successful at doing this. We know what the process is for doing it. We know how to immerse people. We know how to get people to be engaged. We know how to measure people. We know how to build narrative around the environments. We know how to use the economy. We actually use money within the environment and pay students to do certain activities so that they're getting value out of it. So our big question now is, how do you move this into virtual reality so we can increase the experience to what we all want to do? And now, what are the questions about what can you do if you can jump and turn and twist and pinch and kick and do all these other things? What kinds of new learning can you bring into the environment? The most important thing to me is, how do we tap into 2 billion people who are using Facebook Messenger as their messaging system? If I take a messaging system like the one in Second Life, I get 100,000 people if I'm lucky, or I just get the people that signed up for their class. So I asked, how can you integrate something like Facebook Messenger into the environment, or any of the collaborative environments to work together? So you kind of get this sense, and this was kind of like a travel log. I went to Paris and I'm showing you all my slides. But I wanted to give you an idea, since we were talking about this morning, is that the way to immerse people is to make them work and live in these virtual environments. is to extend your content into these virtual environments, is to integrate with the outside marketing mechanisms like Amazon, and keep working in the same family. So if your family is your own family, it's very easy to work together. But if you're working in small teams, you want to keep those teams together so you can keep your institutional knowledge together.